Absolute origin, today on LaserNug. Welcome back to the shop today. So for the last 2.5 months, being a new user to lasers and new to the bolt, I've been trying to learn as I go along, like many of you, and I've noticed that most folks, when they run jobs or designs on the laser, they choose user origin in Lightburn. So I did. I saw the option for absolute origin, but I didn't really quite understand what it meant. I've seen a few videos on it, probably like you folks. I didn't quite get it. I didn't understand the connection or the difference between the two until I made my first business card template. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put it right up here. And a couple of good folks were kind enough to say, hey, template looks great, but don't use user origin, use absolute origin. It's way better, more efficient. Absolute origin. It's time to do some digging. So I kept digging, watching some Lightburn tutorial videos, watching some other YouTube channels. Still didn't get it. I'm a little slow sometimes, I recognize. But I knew that if people had taken the time in the community to say, hey, when you're using a template, use the absolute origin, I knew there had to be something to it. So I kept digging. And believe it or not, yesterday the light bulb went on. And definitely, if you're making templates or something that you reproduce on the same stable template over and over again, absolute origin is your friend. I'm going to show you the difference in my own words today, and I hope it helps you out. You may have noticed, I never plugged the bolt in, and I still haven't turned on my computer yet. I was able just to walk into the shop, turn the bolt on, put my template in, autofocus it, and push start. It's that simple. Because I used absolute origin. Let's roll into Lightburn and I'll show you the difference. So if we jump into Lightburn, you'll see I've got my work table here, and you've probably noticed that your X and Y axis are reflective of the workspace in your bolt. In other words, you're 20 inches across and it shows you 12 inches down. And this work table provides you a direct relation to the bolt's work table. So if we just take a moment here and make this a little bit bigger, I just make a simple design, user origin, and I've got a cut line around it. If I highlight my design, which I've grouped, and I come down to the bottom right-hand side of my screen, you'll see I've set it on user origin. You'll see that currently my job origin or my user-defined origin is here in the middle left, and if you come back to my design, you'll see there's a little green block there. And watch the little green block when I come back to the right and I click the top left corner on job origin. It moves. If I click the top right corner, it moves to the top right. I can click the center, and you can't see it well, but it's in the center. Or I can click the middle center down on the bottom. What this is telling me, or what I've learned in my own words, is this is kind of the tie that binds between the bolt and your design. So when you create your design in Lightburn and you choose a user-defined origin, such as the top left corner, which 99% of the time is what I use, unless I'm doing something that's a circular logo or a circular design, and then I usually put it in the middle. What that little green dot does is it's a point of reference, or as I said, the tie that binds between the laser head or the computer in the bolt and the software in Lightburn. If I send this file over to the bolt, as many of you have done, I press send. Let's just give it no name. There's the beep. The bolt receives the file, and even though on my workspace in Lightburn I had that design sitting at the 9-inch mark on the x-axis, it's kind of irrelevant because I choose where to put that laser head, and here's how I tie it together. I'm going to put my material in here. I have a 3 by 1 inch design, so I'm certainly not going to start a brand new sheet of plywood, but I've got lots of space on this one. If I was to attempt to try to start this design at 9 inches, I've got nowhere to make that design. So what I am going to do is I'm going to use my directionals, and I'm going to come down to a space that I think is about 3 by 1 inch, or I've got that space. And just for the sake of the camera, I'll move you all the way over here. And I think, okay, I've got about 3 inches there. I come up here and I press the origin button, and that tells the bolt that this is where the green dot is in my design. And I'm going to frame it, so I frame the design just to make sure. Yep, got lots of room. I've got my origin set. That's when I autofocus and I press start, and away we go. In other words, it's user defined. That green dot is the tie that binds my design to wherever it is I choose to put the laser head and press origin. That connects it. It says that's where the green dot is. This is where the design begins relative to where I set it. Whether it was the top left corner, top right, doesn't matter. It'll work it from there. Employing user origin makes a ton of sense, which is probably why it's the only thing I've used for 2.5 months. Because I'm not going to start a brand new piece of 12 by 20 inch material every time I have a job. I want to make sure that I'm using up all of the available material on each of these craft boards or coasters, tumblers, whatever it is that I'm working on. I've got lots of spare space from other jobs. I can simply utilize user origin to put my design where I want it. But I think absolute origin has a bigger purpose. It finally made sense to me why several of you suggested I use absolute origin when I'm working with templates. This template is static. It never changes. It's the exact same size every time. All of the card slots are in the exact same place. It's set up in my Lightburn file to engrave in the exact same area. And the only way it works is if I make sure that this template starts and sits in the exact same position every time I put it in the bolt. When I place this into the bolt, it's exactly square, it's stiff. I slide it right into the top left corner against the X and Y axis rulers in exactly the same spot. It never changes. It's not like cardboard. It doesn't fray or rip or become crumbled or bent. It's always the same size every single time. That way. Up until yesterday, when I realized why it's so helpful, every time I was burning production cards, whether they're for myself or someone else, I'd put my template in, and then I would play with the laser, trying to get the laser target dot to exactly line up in one spot. Then I'd frame it several times to make sure it was in the right workspace. I'd do my autofocus, set my origin, most importantly, and then start the job. Well, now I don't have to do that anymore. Let's take a look at the difference for absolute origin. When we've chosen user origin, you've got this little block here that moves your green dot around your design. If I could ask you to take your eyes up to the top left of the screen where you see X position and Y position, keep your eyes on that while I'm clicking those dots down below user origin. Even though the green dot is moving all around my design as I click different positions, you'll notice that the X and Y position do not move. That's because I'm on user origin. If you follow your eyes to the bottom right, I'm going to click user origin and I'm going to choose absolute, and watch what happens below. Your job origin matrix goes shaded. It doesn't work anymore. But take a look up at the top left of your X and Y position. Anywhere I move my design, those two coordinates, or that set of coordinates, moves with it. And quite honestly, just as an FYI, if I go back to user origin and I move my design, they also move with it. Those two coordinates there always track exactly where your design is relative to your 12 by 20 workspace. I have it in inches currently. I'm just going to move over here to the middle where it says in, right beside rotate, and I'm going to change that to millimeters. I prefer that. Moving it around, it's constantly moving. When I come back down here and I change it to absolute, what's going to be recorded if I left this here in the file is in the top left hand corner, it'll be 203.9 millimeters across the x-axis and down 78.3 on the y-axis. If I leave this file here and send it to the bolt, that's exactly where the laser head is going to go. So now you're thinking, well, what part of the design is it referencing? Where's the tie that binds? Take a look again. Move your eyes up to the top middle, to the left of the word rotate on your toolbar. You'll see another grid here with a dot. It's in the top left. This is the grid that you use for absolute origin. If you take a look at the Y and X position across to the left, whenever I click the dot on this grid, it's currently sitting in the top left of my design. If I click on the top right, watch the numbers change. If I click at the bottom right, watch the numbers change. These are the exact coordinates in millimeters that ties to the laser head on the bolt. But you're using this grid now for placing your origin or where you'd like the laser to reference your design, as opposed to using the one that we've been using for a few months down on the bottom right. If I leave this design right here as it sits, and I've clicked the top left dot on the grid, that means that when I send the file, the bolt is going to assume that my design starts at 203.9 on the X position and 78.3 millimeters down on the Y position. Whether I have material placed there or not, that's where the laser head is going to assume the top left of my design is. If you look at the very top of your touch screen, you'll see X, Y, Z, and U. Those are your access coordinates. And if you notice, as I move the laser around, so do the coordinates. That tracks the exact precise position of your laser head anywhere it is on the workspace or on the honeycomb. So in order to set my absolute origin, I placed my template into the honeycomb once, squared it up. I moved my laser head to exactly where I finally determined the origin should start, framed it a few times to make sure it was perfectly square and it was in the right position. And then I took these coordinates off of the screen, and that's what I input into Lightburn to set my absolute origin. So now while my job's running in the background, I can continue doing my processing and my shipping labels, get all my packages ready to go out today. And in the meantime, I'm creating more thank you cards before I run out. Piece of cake. So by setting up a template for production work and trying to make it as efficient as possible, such as using absolute origin, I can continue doing other work during the day, and I can run my jobs at the same time while I'm doing my shipping and other activities. Today, these are welcome cards for myself, but if it's a production run for business cards for somebody else, I've got that running in the background while I'm packing other customers' goods. I don't have to toy around with trying to move the laser head and then pressing origin and making sure I'm in the right spot. It always knows, every time I use that standard template, exactly where the job starts and where it finishes, because it's saved in the file that's saved to the bolt. Frees up a lot of time and makes you twice as productive. Whole lot easier to run the job and minimizes any errors, I think. So for those of you that are new to the bolt or new to lasers, I hope this has been helpful. I don't think you use absolute origin all the time. I think there are benefits most of the time to using your user origin, But when you are doing production work like that, and you've got a static piece of material that's always placed exactly in the same place on your workspace in the bolt, I think it's the best choice. Certainly working out great for me. I wanted to just take a moment and thank you folks in the community for helping me out once again. It's an excellent feature in Lightburn that I didn't clearly understand, but now that I do, I'm using it on all my templates. It just makes sense. Thanks so much for hanging out today. I hope you have a wonderful week with your families. Please be kind to one another, and I'll see you again on the next one. I'm Gord Potter, and you've been watching Laser Nug. Cheers.